Some stories begin with a whisper. Mine began with a storm raging behind my ribs. I stood in the principal's office, my hands shaking, tears stinging behind my eyes, while two perfectly dressed parents stared at me like I was dirt beneath their polished shoes. They didn't even bother hiding their smirks. To them, I wasn't an exhausted mother standing up for her daughter. I was a failure, a single woman who should have known better than to try raising a child alone. Just a mismatched pair of heels and a cardigan. They had no idea, not the faintest clue, that one phone call was all it would take to summon someone who could tear apart their smug certainty and make them regret every poisonous word they'd let spill into the room. If you've ever been told you're not enough, that being alone is a weakness, that motherhood is somehow a flaw, then this story is your shield. Because what comes next isn't only about hurt, it's about strength. Smash the like button of your heart. This story shows what real family looks like when the world turns its back on you. And trust me, when genuine love and true protection walk together, no bully alive can stand against them. My name is Hazel. I'm 38 years old. I spent most of my life building walls so high that love couldn't climb them and pain couldn't break through. I once believed that was strength. Now I know it was fear disguised as armor. My first teacher was my own father, Christopher. He was the man who showed me how easily love can disappear. I was 13 when I found my mother, Clara, slumped at the kitchen table, trembling as she held proof of his affair. He hadn't just betrayed us, he'd replaced us, vanished without warning into a brighter, younger life. He left behind unpaid bills and a daughter who learned her first brutal lesson early. A man's love has an expiration date. Mom worked herself to the bone just to keep us afloat. 3 jobs, cheap meals, clothes that still carried someone else's name. I learned not to wait for rescue. I learned how silence can sound like dignity when pride is all you have left. 3 years later, she remarried. His name was William. I was 16, angry and suspicious of every smile he offered. William was nothing like my father. He was calm, dependable, successful. He owned half the downtown real estate, which terrified me. I had learned that power always came with a price, so I shut him out. I never called him dad. I refused his money. I distrusted the steady kindness he tried to give. When he offered to pay for my college, I chose debt instead, because I wouldn't let another man believe he owned any part of me. On my 18th birthday, I packed my bags, ignored his goodbye, and walked away for good. Years passed. I waited tables, poured coffee, worked double shifts while chipping away at those stubborn student loans. That's where I met Michael, 25, a dreamer, a graphic designer chasing his big break. I was 23 and worn down. He noticed me, and that was enough. After years of forcing myself to be unbreakable, I met someone who made me laugh over spilled espresso and late-night bus rides. He called me beautiful when I smelled like coffee grounds. He made life feel lighter. 6 months later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, I was pregnant. For the first time, I believed miracles might still exist for women like me. At first, Michael was excited. He bought baby books, talked about apartments with space for a nursery. But hope can lie. As my belly grew, his attention shrank. Nights out stretched longer, his replies grew shorter. Excuses stacked up like dirty dishes. By my 7th month, I found the messages, flirty words that turned my stomach to ice. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He said I'd changed, said pregnancy made me boring, said he needed space. He left with a half-empty suitcase and a full load of self-pity. 6 weeks later, Martha was born. He wasn't there. He never called, never sent a single cent. It was as if we'd been erased, wiped clean from his life. That was lesson number 2. Every man leaves eventually. It's not a matter of if, only when. I kept that belief locked deep inside for years. William kept trying to break through the walls I'd built. Birthday calls, small checks, messages through my mother that I ignored. I thought shutting him out meant I was winning. I thought independence meant standing alone. Then came the day the world decided to challenge everything I believed. My daughter, Martha, 10 years old, shy, artistic, a ray of sunshine wrapped in curiosity, started coming home with tear-stained cheeks. At first, it was whispers and giggles, the kind of quiet cruelty children learn by watching adults. But it didn't stay small for long. Amanda Denton, a classmate whose parents believed money was the same as morality, turned bullying into sport. For weeks, she trailed my daughter, hurling words as sharp as knives. You don't have a daddy because your mommy's a bad woman. That's why he left. Nobody wants you. Martha tried to ignore it. She tried to be brave, but even the strongest hearts have limits. When Amanda destroyed my daughter's art project, a butterfly sculpture Martha had spent weeks perfecting, she sneered, "Fatherless girls don't deserve to win anything." Something inside my daughter snapped. She shoved Amanda hard. Amanda fell, scraped her knee, and ran home crying. And that was all it took. The very next morning, my phone rang. "Ms. Hazel," Principal Harrison said, his voice tight, "we need to speak immediately about an incident involving your daughter." When I arrived, the air in his office felt heavy enough to suffocate. Principal Harrison sat stiffly behind his desk, clearly uncomfortable, and beside him were Andrew and Amber Denton, dressed as if they were heading to court, not discussing elementary school drama. Andrew crossed his leg with practiced confidence, the kind of man who introduced himself as a lawyer before saying hello. Amber's perfume was so overpowering it made the room sting. She smiled, cold and precise. "Miss Hazel, thank you for coming," Harrison began. "We, have a serious issue to discuss." I spoke calmly. I explained everything. The weeks of insults, the emotional wounds, the messages Martha had sent me, begging not to go back to school. I held up my phone with proof. That's when Amber cut me off sharply. "Enough," she said. "Your daughter assaulted mine. She pushed her to the ground. That's violence." I stared at her, stunned. She was defending herself after months of— Amber leaned forward, eyes glittering. "Children without structure act out, Miss Hazel. It's tragic. No father figure. Just you, clearly overwhelmed. Some women simply aren't meant to raise children alone." Her words struck harder than any blow. My stomach clenched, my pulse pounding in my ears. Andrew slid a neatly typed document across the desk. "We're willing to keep this out of the police system if you sign this," he said smoothly. I looked down. It wasn't just an apology, it was a confession. It stated that I had failed as a mother, that my unstable home caused Martha's behavior, and that I accepted full responsibility for poor parenting. "You want me to admit I'm a bad mother?" I whispered. Amber tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "We want accountability," she said. "Perhaps a parenting class or a father figure program. Every child needs a man. It's basic biology." Even Principal Harrison looked uneasy, but he cleared his throat. "Ms. Hazel, until you sign and show remorse, Martha will remain suspended. We can't allow violent students to return without consequences." I sat there frozen, humiliated, hollow. They weren't just punishing Martha. They were punishing me for every choice I'd ever made. For getting pregnant, for being abandoned, for surviving on my own. They were saying the abuse I endured was my fault, and now my daughter was paying for it. I left that office in a daze. I didn't sign anything. I walked out, sat in my car, and shook in the parking lot. When I got home, Martha was waiting, her face swollen from crying. She looked up at me with broken eyes and asked the question that shattered me. "Mommy, why doesn't my daddy protect me?" I had no answer. Am I suspended? Because Amanda is right. Because you're a bad woman. That was the moment everything collapsed. Every wall I'd built fell apart. I realized I was failing my daughter, not because I was single, not because I was incapable, but because I was too proud, too afraid, too wounded to accept help from the one man who had offered it for 20 years. Martha needed protection. She needed proof that Amanda's words were lies. She needed someone to stand up and show her that loyalty, safety, and love still existed. My hands shook as I walked into the kitchen and picked up my phone. I scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in 2 decades. William, my stepfather. I pressed call before I could stop myself. He answered on the second ring. "Hazel." His voice was older but steady, calm, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for that call. At first, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, then everything spilled out. The bullying, the suspension, the document, the humiliation, being labeled inadequate, a bad woman who deserved abandonment. There was a long pause. When William spoke again, his voice wasn't warm. It was ice, controlled and furious. "You are my daughter," he said. "Martha is my granddaughter. Those people have made a serious mistake. You have not failed her. They failed both of you. Then he said, do not sign anything. Do not speak to anyone. I will handle this. I don't want your money, I said quickly. This isn't about money, he interrupted gently. This is about family. You've been my family since the day I married your mother. I'm sorry I let you push me away for so long, but I won't let you face this alone. Not anymore. He told me to meet him at the school the next morning. 9 a.m. sharp. He said he'd be there. I hung up and stared at my phone, terrified and hopeful all at once. What had I just done? Would he really show up, or would this be one more disappointment, one more man who promised and failed? That night, sleep never came. I lay awake replaying every moment, every cruel word, every smug look on the Dentons' faces. But at 8:55 a.m., standing outside Principal Harrison's office, I saw a sleek black car pull up. The door opened, and William stepped out. He looked exactly like what he was, a man of power, wealth, and zero tolerance for injustice. He walked over, placed a steady, reassuring hand on my shoulder, and gave me a single nod. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel alone. We walked into the office together. The Dentons were already there, wearing their usual smug expressions. Principal Harrison sat behind his desk, clearly prepared to rush things along and pressure me into signing. Then William spoke. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. The principal looked up, and his face drained of color. He recognized William instantly. Everyone in this city knew who he was. He funded half the district's programs. He sat on the school board's advisory committee. He was untouchable. Mr. William, Harrison stammered as he stood. I didn't realize you were... I'm Hazel's stepfather, William said calmly as he took a seat across from the Dentons. And Martha's grandfather. I understand there's been some confusion about accountability here. Amber Denton, still brimming with arrogance, offered a tight smile. We're simply asking for an apology for Martha's violent behavior, sir. Surely you understand the importance of discipline. William looked at her with a calm so controlled it felt dangerous. Mrs. Denton, let me be very clear. Your daughter has spent weeks psychologically tormenting my granddaughter, using deeply personal and cruel insults about her family. When your daughter destroyed Martha's property and mocked her for being fatherless, Martha defended herself. That is not violence. That is self-preservation. Andrew Denton leaned forward. With all due respect, Mr. William, Martha pushed our daughter, and William cut him off, his voice hard as steel. Your daughter has been bullying mine repeatedly and viciously, and the two of you have been complicit, spreading malicious gossip about my daughter's character, calling her inadequate, calling her a bad woman. Mr. Denton, that is defamation, and I do not tolerate it. The room fell silent. William turned to Principal Harrison. Here's what's going to happen. You will reinstate Martha immediately and issue a formal apology from the school. The Dentons will provide a written apology to both Hazel and Martha, and their daughter will be enrolled in a bullying intervention program. If any part of this is refused, I will take this to the school board, the local media, and my personal attorneys. The choice is yours. Principal Harrison looked like he might faint. Mr. William, I'm sure we can resolve this. Then resolve it now. The Dentons' expression shifted from smug to panicked. Andrew tried to argue, but William silenced him with a single look. 20 minutes later, I walked out of that office with a formal apology letter and Martha's reinstatement, and the certainty that the Dentons' power had completely collapsed. William didn't celebrate. He simply squeezed my shoulder and said, You're a great mother, Hazel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As we stepped into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Protected, valued, loved. William didn't just win a confrontation. He gave me back my dignity. He proved that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the world tries to break you. Martha got her life back, and I got my father. If you believe William is the definition of a real father, smash that like button. If this story gave you chills, drop a comment and tell me what you would have done, and subscribe. Because every week we bring you stories where justice isn't just served, it's delivered with precision. See you in the next one.